it's a conversation starter. You know,
And
like I have a tattoo on my hand that's a PTSD ribbon made of birds, and there's a semicolon in the middle of it, you know, for Project Semicolon, which, for those who don't know or may not be aware, like, there's a movement where people are putting semicolon tattoos on their bodies as a symbol of continuing their story. So instead of putting a period at the end of a sentence, you put a semicolon because your story continues. And so that really appealed to me as a writer. It's like, oh, I get that, you know.
right.
So yeah, so it's on my hand, and people will ask me, oh, what's your tattoo mean? And I'm like, oh, it's you know, it's for post-traumatic stress disorder and, you know, suicide awareness. And they say, oh, are you a veteran? And that starts the conversation of, I'm not. You know, veterans are not the only people who end up with PTSD. Like, I was raped, and that was a trauma. You know, you don't have to go to war to end up with PTSD. And their stories and their, you know, war traumas are just as bad as mine. But everyone has this idea in their head that PTSD is a military thing, and it's not.
Say that again.
So PTSD, people in general think that that is limited to people who've served in the military, who've gone overseas and, you know, killed people and watched, you know, horrific things as fighters in a war. And that's not always the case. Like, you can have trauma from other violent crimes or other things in your life. You know, I don't know if you experience PTSD from, you know, what happened in your family, but, you know, it certainly could have happened, you know, just from going through what you went through. And, you know, I've looked at the statistics, and I think it's something like, it's like 90% of rape victims end up with at least some symptoms of PTSD, and 30% end up with full-blown PTSD. And that was me, and it still is, but you know, it's something I've worked through, and I've figured out what my triggers are, and I've been able to manage it over the years. You know, it's been a process, but I've figured it out.
Right, and that's what one of the things I noted is it's an evolving process. You know, it's not just a one and done, oh, I did my therapy, oh, I did this, I did that, and I'm good. It's a constant process, and I appreciate you saying, that's why I had you say it twice, for people to understand that PTSD doesn't just happen to people who have been to combat. It has been your own personal war, you know, and your own personal combat and your own personal story of that loss, you know, and that traumatic event occurring. And it's important for people to understand. And I get that question all the time as a clinician. Oh, so you see a lot of, you know, service members. Well, while I used to work on military bases, that's not the only person or people who I see with PTSD.
Right. And it's not to say that what they went through isn't worthy of PTSD. Like, it is. Like, what they went through is horrible and horrific, but that's not the only subset of the population.
Right, and what I will
that
say, too...
experiences it.
Yeah, and also, people tend to minimize, you know, whether it's... but, you know, let's say they go through a rape or a robbery or a car accident, they'll tend to minimize that and say, well, it's not like I went to combat, or it's not like I lost a limb, or it's not like X, Y, or Z. And I always have to be very clear with people, like, that is their stuff. You know, we're talking what your mind, what your body have been through.
Right. Your body still went into fight or flight when you experience that, you know, and unfortunately, in situations of trauma, whether it's combat or rape or a car accident or gun violence, you still experience a trauma. And your body reacts the exact same way as it would in a combat situation. You either shut down or you fight.
Yep. Fight, flight, or freeze.
Fight or flight.
Yep.
That's scientific theory right there. Like, that's what happens. And unfortunately, with a lot of traumas, you get stuck in that fight or flight mode. Like, all of the chemicals in your body are constantly thinking that you are under attack. And so it's hard to get that under control unless you make changes, unless you seek help and, admit that, okay, I'm not okay right now. And it's okay that you're not okay.
And it's okay to not be okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you this. What made you reach out, or how did you, what was the process in even reaching out to find a therapist? Because some people might want to know, where do I go? What do I do? What do I say?
So I looked online for people who specialized in trauma. I mean, that was how I did it. I've been through 5 different therapists in my 10 years of therapy. Mm-hmm. And a therapist may fit you for a period of time, and you grow and evolve and change. And if the relationship is not working out from a clinician-patient perspective, then you find somebody else who fits your needs better. And that's okay. I've had multiple therapists, and they've all done great things for me. And, part of my PTSD is memory loss. And so, literally, I can't remember some of my therapists from 10 years ago because my mind blocks it out. And that's just a symptom of what I've been through. But, I know they all had positive impact in my life. And you can just go online. I mean, I think, what is it? Is it Psychology Today?
That's it.
Yeah, okay,
That's
cool.
it.
I remembered.
Yeah.
Wow. That's like an online source where you can put in, what you're dealing with. And because different therapists and counselors and clinicians have different areas of expertise, areas that they specialize in. And so, you may want to see somebody who specializes in, depression for women over 40 or, trauma. Everyone's different, and each clinician has their niche where they're really good at XYZ.
Yep.
And all that information's on the internet.
And Psychology Today is a wonderful site to do that, because on the left-hand side of that website, you can actually tailor it to your insurance or lack thereof. You can tailor it to their background, like you said, who they work with, what techniques and tools and all that stuff.
Right, yeah. And it may be, you may feel more comfortable with a female therapist or a male therapist. I've always had female therapists. That's just what I'm more comfortable with. It doesn't mean anything against a male therapist or you, but, I'm more comfortable with a woman telling her my stuff. And that's what worked for me. But everybody's different, and there's so many options out there. Individual therapy, group therapy, remote therapy, and you don't even have to go to an office these days. You can Skype in.
Thank you. Look, I feel like we need to switch chairs. It's like I'm listening to myself talk about.
Well, I did do a little bit of cognitive behavioral therapy for my nutrition clients. They gave us a little overview in school, so we were trained in that. And even as a massage therapist, sometimes I feel like a counselor, because people tell me all sorts of stuff.
Oh, I bet.
But the cool thing is that they don't expect me to fix it. They just want me to listen.
They just want to have...
they just want to have somebody listen, and I'll actively, reflect, do active listening with them. And, I don't give advice or anything, but...
But you bring up, that's it, though. I think a lot of times when people talk about those things, they don't necessarily want to be fixed, but they just want to be heard. Right.
And being heard is the first step. Well, actually, the first step is admitting that you might need some assistance.
Right.
The second step is just being heard. Having, whether it's a professional or a friend or your massage therapist or or somebody to listen to you and to care.
Yep.
To genuinely care about what you are going through. Because, like I said in the beginning, we all have stuff.
We all
have trauma. We all have shit in our life. It's just, where are you on the spectrum of stuff and shit?
And letting it go.
And are you willing to be open and talk about it and be vulnerable? Or are you trying to stuff it all down and hide it from yourself and the rest of the world?
And recognizing it is scary. The unknown is scary, and so honoring whatever feelings come up for you, even as people start to think about getting help from a professional or even opening up to, a crowd of people. Like that, it takes vulnerability, it takes courage, and it takes an ability to just be present with whatever emotions come up.
Right.
And that's okay.
Yeah, feelings are okay. Feelings are feelings, and they are a normal part of the human experience. And I'll say that, I've only been off my medications for about a month now. It was a 2-year wean because I'd been on them for a decade.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel stuff more strongly than I used to. Like, I'll look at Facebook and see some silly animal video. Not silly, but a moving animal video, and I start crying. I'm like, what the heck is this crap? Like, I didn't do that before.
What is this water coming from my eyes?
What is it? What are these? What's this water coming out of my eyes? Being okay with feeling things and not being 100% numb all the time because of pharmaceuticals or because that's what I needed at the time. But being okay with that rawness and that vulnerability and knowing that feelings are normal. You're not going to be happy 100% of the time. If you are, that's called being psychotic. If you are happy 100% of the time, you are probably a psychopath. Like, that's not normal. You are not feeling things in your life.
Right.
And then that's my non-professional opinion. But I like to tell people that I am mostly happy most of the time now. And that's good enough for me.
And again, it comes down to that choice, right? So I want to do this because I want to start wrapping it up. Wow, you have I really could talk to you for a long time. But you've touched on pretty much everything that's part of the action plan. And even like your transition off of meds and into the more natural realm. And again, it's not for everybody. Some people prefer the more natural route. Some people prefer traditional medication. It's really up to you as the individual. But I would say, if you had any words of wisdom or guidance for anybody who may have gone through their own trauma and that loss of personal sense of safety and self and identity in that moment, what would you say to them?
Don't be afraid to reach out for help. You don't have to do it alone. Like, if you shove it down into your soul and you don't talk about it and you don't let people know what you're going through and you don't seek help, whether it's professional, friend, family, coworker, whatever, you're only doing yourself a disservice. I'm a big connector to. I feel like I'm a phoenix. Like that's what I associate myself with. It was the first tattoo I got was a phoenix on my back, and that's the mythical creature. For those of you who don't know, that was burned and rises from the ashes. It's a really cool firebird. And I think that if we stick together, it's easier to rise from the fire, from the ashes. And we are all going to have our own personal fires. Some fires are bigger than others, but we all have our own stuff, our own crap that we go through. And if you reach out and you find that connection, it's going to be easier than if you try to do it alone.
Connection. Yep. I can't stress that enough. So thank you. Any other, and I'm actually going to include the link to the suicide hotline as well, which is 1-800-273-8255, which I think 8255 is help. Or is it 8255 or?
No, I don't know, dude. You're going back to the 90s.
273. Right, you're like, I'm going to find the link. Whatever.
Yeah, you'll find
It'll be in the
notes.
I should know. But you're like, I don't know. So do me a favor, and do you have any other, I know you talked about some resources that people could use, including writing. Anything else that you thought of that you wanted to share?
So most counties have, I mean, if you've been through either rape or domestic violence, there are usually resources within the counties. I know from a Lake Norman, North Carolina perspective, there's Safe Alliance. They are a nonprofit resource for people who have experienced a rape, DV, which is domestic violence, or any kind of violence.